Dear students, here are the instructions to the source criticism task. In this exercise, we will focus on source criticism. The task will consist of two parts. Part 1, where you get to study and to get information about the source criticism and what that is. And part 2, that is a task where you get to use the information that you've learned in part 1. Part 2 must be handed in no later than Friday, week 15. That's before the Easter break. And the purpose with this exercise or task is to become better at evaluating information and sources. And you find the knowledge requirements, kunskapskraven, at the end of this document. But let's start with part 1, the information about the source criticism. For all information, it is important to practice using source criticism because nowadays we have a lot of fake news, and it's important when you're looking for a source that you can find a source that's credible and also a source that's usable. So it's important. So here follows information about the criteria you should use when evaluating a source, and also questions to use when evaluating the source that can help you if you ask these questions. And remember, as I said before, source criticism is not only about how credible the information is, but also how relevant it is to your purpose. To start with, the first criteria is time. And it's important to find information that is up to date, since the new events can make changes to the information. So it's important to find information that has been updated or reviewed or revised or something like that, as close as to present date as possible, because then you get the correct information, because that could change over time. Questions to ask: when was it published? Date, year, and so on. Has it been updated or revised recently? Because that could be the case sometimes. So is the information up to date? Is the information true still? Second criteria is relevance. It is important to find the best source of information for the task or the text that you are going to use the information in. So you have to know your purpose with your task. Why are you looking for the information? What type of information are you looking for? And is this source relevant to my purpose? For instance, a blog post might be relevant, or do you need a factual post instead? Questions to ask: is the information relevant to your topic? Which is the intended audience of this source? Is this the same type of audience you are going to write to? Is it on a good level? Can you find any bias or tendency in the information? And what that means, that bias means that the source has a subjective angle, so there has a specific point of view, which means that the information could be influenced by that angle or not fully objective. It is important to get information that is objective. If you have a tendency or bias in it, it is influenced of your point of view. So you have to know what type of point of view it has, the source has. Third criteria, author. It is important to know who is behind the source, because that person or company or authority or whoever is behind it might have a specific purpose, again a bit of bias, and therefore select what information is used in the source. So we have to know also that the author has knowledge about the topic. So questions to ask: who is the author or the writer of the source? Who is behind this source? And is it credible? Or is it something specific? Does the author have the qualifications to write about this information? If you're looking for a source about medicine or something like that, is it someone who's knowledgeable in that area who is behind this information? And also, is there any contact information? Because if you can find an About Us page or something like that, it's important, because then you can find who is behind this source, and then you can see if they've published anything else and if they're credible and things like that. So it's important to know. Number 4, reliable. It is important to find a source that has credible information and that is trustworthy. Again, it's important because we have a lot of fake news, and on the internet everyone can publish or create a homepage. So it's important to find that this has credible information and that it's trustworthy. And questions to ask. Where does the information come from? Do we know that? Is it first-hand or is it second-hand for somewhere else? Is the information supported by evidence? Can you verify any of the information in other sources or from personal knowledge? If you know that it sort of sounds true, probably it is. If you feel like, I never heard about this before, then you can look it up in other sources. Does the language or tone seem biased or free of emotion? Are there spelling, grammar, or other typographical errors? That can also influence if this is a credible or reliable source. Criteria number 5, the purpose. It is important to know the purpose of the source, because the purpose can influence what type of information is used in the source again. And does the purpose match the information, or does it influence what type of information there is? So questions to ask. What is the purpose of the information? Is it to inform us, or is it to teach us something? Perhaps it's to sell or entertain or persuade you. Then it's important to know that purpose. And how do you know that? How do you know that the purpose is to entertain? Does the author make that intentions or purpose clear? Is the information fact, opinion, or propaganda, or is it actually objective? Again, with the bias. Can we trust this? So those were the criteria for the source criticism, and it's important to study these and to have these questions in mind when you are working with part 2. And part 2 is the task itself, and it's called a famous person. And here's the background that you need to know before you start the task. You have been asked to write a column in the school newspaper. The column must be about a now living famous person from an English-speaking country. To be able to write this text, you have to do research and find good and usable information about the person. So here's the task itself. You have to find 2 different sources that have information about this famous person that you have chosen. And now you should compare the 2 sources and fill in the form below. Write about both the positive and the negative aspects of each criteria, if they fulfill them or not, in both sources, and remember to explain the reasons for your answers. I couldn't find this because, or something like that. And end the task with explaining why you would use each source or not if you were actually writing a column about this famous person. So are these good sources to use if you are doing that task for real? This form you can copy-paste and set into a new document that you then hand in. First off, you have to choose a famous person, so you write that name and the country, if you please. Link to source number 1 and link to source number 2 so that I can follow them. And then you go through the criteria: time, relevance, author, reliable, and purpose. And you ask the questions and you write your answers to this. And finally, why or why not I would use the source if you were to write this properly. Then here at the end we have the knowledge requirements. Den här gången så är det då att man kan förstå när man tittar i källorna, att man kan då kommentera på de här källorna och att man då dessutom uppvisar strategier för att kunna tillgodogöra sig och kritiskt granska innehållet i talad och skriven engelska.